This is not just a story, it's a silent scream that lasted 4 decades. Mary Johnson devoted 40 years of her life to the Vanderbilt family, serving with care, loyalty, and invisible strength. While others came and went, she stayed, through storms, secrets, and silence. But when they no longer needed her, they discarded her like a forgotten note, without even a thank you. Set against the golden heat of Palm Springs and the cold marble halls of a mansion where power always spoke louder than kindness, this is a journey through betrayal, resilience, and an unexpected uprising. Get ready. This story will grip your heart until the very end. If you've ever felt overlooked, if you've ever given your all and received nothing in return, stay with us. And please, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your voice matters here, because some stories aren't just meant to be told. They're meant to awaken us. We're listening, and Mary's story deserves to be heard.
40 years is a lifetime, and it truly is a lifetime when spent serving others. My name is Meredith Oliver, and on this warm January morning, at 68 years old, I held in my trembling hands a white envelope that would change everything. The Vanderbilt mansion loomed behind me as I read those few lines. Your services are no longer required. Please collect your belongings by noon. No explanation, no gratitude for the 4 decades I dedicated to keeping that household running. Sweat trickled down my forehead as the Palm Springs sun warmed the pavement. I stood still, observing the beige stucco walls of that house I knew better than the lines on my own hand. Each crack, each corner held a piece of my history. The bougainvillea, which I planted 30 years ago, drooped carelessly over the main gate, oblivious to my misfortune. How do you explain to your heart that you no longer belong to the place where you've lived almost your entire adult life? Mrs. Eleanor, the matriarch, didn't even have the decency to tell me this while looking me in the eye. She, who watched me grow old within those walls, who entrusted me with the care of her children, and later, her grandchildren. How many times did I wipe away her tears when her husband, Mr. Arthur, came home late, smelling of strange perfume? How many times did I listen to her complaints about the ingratitude of her children while I served her chamomile tea to calm her nerves? Now, it was I who was leaving, without even being able to say goodbye properly. I gathered my things, some faded photos, 2 old floral dresses, a shawl that Mr. Arthur gave me in one of his rare fits of generosity, and a silver rosary that belonged to my mother. Everything fit into a small suitcase. How little space 40 years take up when they become objects. I left my little room in the back wing tidy, as it always was. I smoothed the bedspread with the corners perfectly aligned, as my mother taught me before she died. I dusted the antique dresser and left the keys on top. I couldn't resist, and made one last pass through the kitchen, that territory that was my kingdom. I caressed the cast iron stove where I prepared thousands of meals, the granite countertops where I kneaded bread for decades. On the way out, I ran into Johnny, the gardener, a man of few words who had worked for the Vanderbilts for almost as long as I had. He looked at me with sad eyes, understanding everything without needing to say anything. Mrs. Meredith, he said softly, this isn't right. I smiled with all the dignity I could muster and gave him a quick hug. I crossed the garden between rose bushes that heard my songs while I hung laundry. The stone fountains murmured a farewell, and the old oak tree that shaded the main patio seemed to bow to me. I watched that oak grow from a sapling. Now, its generous branches sheltered the birds I fed for years. As I approached the gate, I heard the voice of Sophia, Mrs. Eleanor's youngest granddaughter. She was only 12 years old and came running, her hair disheveled, her cheeks flushed. Nana Meredith, is it true that you're leaving? Grandma said she doesn't need you anymore, but I don't believe it. Her big black eyes filled with tears. I hugged her tightly, feeling my heart break even more. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions, honey, I said, avoiding letting bitterness seep through my words. But you'll always be my girl, even if I'm not here to tell you stories anymore. I kissed her on the forehead and asked her to go back inside. I didn't want her to see me cry. I didn't want her last image of me to be one of weakness. When I finally, crossed the wrought iron gate, I felt as if a part of me remained trapped inside. The weight of the suitcase was nothing compared to the weight of uncertainty. Where would I go now? In town, everyone knew me as the Vanderbilt's housekeeper, as if my identity had merged with that family's. Who was I without them? What value does a 68-year-old woman have, with hands worn from work and no education beyond what life teaches? Downtown Palm Springs was bustling with life. Tourists took photos of the Palm Springs Art Museum. Vendors displayed pottery and jewelry. Locals went about their routines. No one noticed that my world was crumbling. I walked aimlessly aimlessly, feeling the midday sun beating down on my skin as the church bells chimed 12 times. Like a hammer, my time at the Vanderbilt mansion had officially ended. I wandered aimlessly through the streets until I reached the main square. My feet led me, almost automatically, to the small coffee shop, The Daily Grind, a local hangout. I left the suitcase next to the table and sat down, exhausted, not so much from the walk, but from the weight of doubt. "Can I get you something, hon?" A warm voice pulled me from my daze. I looked up and saw Patty Miller, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, a stark contrast to the constant phoniness of the mansion. "A coffee, please?" I asked, my voice cracking. "And maybe some advice on where to look for work at my age." Patty sat down across from me without ceremony. "You're Mrs. Johnson, right? The one who used to work up at the Vandergelt place." The tears I'd held back for hours finally came. Between sobs, I told her everything. How I was let go over some paperwork. How 40 years of dedication meant less than Mrs. Vandergelt's whim, who, rumor had it, needed to cut costs after her eldest son lost a fortune on bad investments. "I've got a little room in the back," Patty said after listening. "It's nothing fancy, but it's clean. I could always use some help here at the diner. For the first time that horrible day, I could breathe. I can't pay you much right now. We'll figure that out later." She cut me off. "For now, just rest." That night, I slept in a space that was a third the size of my old room in the mansion, but the simple mattress felt like a luxury. The next day, I started waiting tables and washing cups. My hands, which used to prepare dinners for politicians and bishops, now served coffee and bagels to construction workers and farmers. A week later, during breakfast, a man walked in. I recognized him right away. Mr. Thompson, a lawyer who occasionally showed up at the house. He looked at me in surprise. "Mrs. Johnson, what are you doing here?" I quickly explained my situation while serving his usual coffee, strong, black, with a dash of cinnamon, to Mr. Thompson. "Did you receive your severance? 401k? Any back pay?" he asked, frowning. "They didn't pay me anything, sir." Mr. Thompson slammed his cup on the table. "That's completely illegal. 40 years of work deserves respect and proper compensation." His words reignited something within me, a spark of indignation that had been suppressed for too long by misguided gratitude toward my employers. For the first time, I realized that maybe I had rights that had been forgotten over the years. "If you'd like," Mr. Thompson continued, pulling a card from his pocket, "I'd like to help you fight for what's fair." Mr. Thompson's card stayed in my apron pocket for 3 days. Whenever I looked at it, I felt a lump in my throat. Suing the Vandergelts meant facing one of the most powerful families in Greenwich. What chance did I have, a simple old cook? I decided on a rainy afternoon when Tommy, the youngest Vandergelt grandson, showed up unexpectedly at the diner. When he saw me, his eyes lit up. "Mrs. Johnson, I've been looking all over for you," he exclaimed, hugging me. "The house is a mess without you. No one can find anything. The food is awful, and Grandma is impossible." My heart clenched at the sight of the boy I practically raised. "How did you find me, kiddo?" I asked around. "Everyone knows who makes the best cinnamon coffee." He lowered his voice. "Grandma says you left because you wanted to, but I found the envelope with your termination papers on her desk. They never gave it to you." I felt everything churning inside. Not only was I fired without explanation, but they hid the money that was rightfully mine. That same afternoon, I called the lawyer. The labor lawsuit was a whirlwind. The Vandergelts retaliated by accusing me of stealing jewelry and silverware for years. Their lawyers, a battalion in expensive suits, found purchased witnesses who swore they saw me hiding valuables among my belongings. It was the word of a housekeeper against that of a large established family. I knew who would win such a lopsided dispute. The local newspapers, almost all friends of the Vandergelts, portrayed me as an ungrateful opportunist. Some customers stopped showing up at Patty's diner when they found out I worked there. "Patty was my rock. Don't give up," she repeated every single day. The truth always comes out. The lawsuit dragged on for months. Each hearing was an ordeal. I looked into Mrs. Vandergelt's eyes, who had once embraced me when I lost my sister, but now treated me like a criminal. Mr. Vandergelt, who used to ask me for that special chicken soup when he was sick, didn't even bother to look at me. The hardest blow came when I tried to withdraw my savings from the bank. My account had been frozen by court order, claiming that the money could be the result of my embezzlement. 40 years of small savings, saved dollar by dollar for old age, were beyond my reach. The nights turned into a torment. I slept poorly, haunted by nightmares where the Caldwells imprisoned me in the basement of their mansion. During the day, I dragged myself to work at the auto shop, smiling at customers while my soul withered. "This will end," Ernie promised me in every conversation. "Just be strong a little longer. I just wondered if there would be anything left of me when it was all over. Sam came back to the diner on a Thursday afternoon. He was carrying a cardboard box. He sat with me during my break, looking nervously at the door. "My grandma doesn't know I'm here," he whispered. "I found this in Grandpa's office." He opened the box and pulled out an account ledger. "Here are the records of all the payments made and those that were never made." I took the ledger with trembling hands. There it was, in Mr. Walter's neat handwriting. Years of incomplete salaries, unfair deductions, ignored overtime. The proof we needed. "Also brought this?" Sam pulled out a voice recorder. "My grandpa always uses it. I recorded a conversation between him and Grandma talking about your case. When I showed the evidence to Ernie, he could hardly believe it. In the recording, Mrs. Eleanor admitted without hesitation that the accusation of theft was just a strategy, just so they wouldn't have to pay me. This changes everything," Ernie said, satisfied. "Get ready for the next hearing." The news spread quickly through the streets of Georgetown. Former Caldwell employees began to contact me, each with their story of abuse and wage theft. Carol, who was a nanny. Joe, the former driver. Teresa, the gardener, who suffered an accident and was fired with nothing. Everyone had grievances and evidence. Father Michael, from St. Mary's Church, offered the parish hall to gather the group. In a short time, there were more than 20 of us exchanging stories, supporting each other, giving strength. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. At the next hearing, everything changed. The judge, impressed with the new evidence, ordered my bank account released immediately. The Caldwell's lawyers, visibly cornered, asked for a recess to reassess their position. Leaving the courthouse, a reporter from the independent newspaper, the Georgetown Gazette, asked me for an interview. I thought about refusing, but something led me to accept. It was time to tell my story. "I don't want revenge," I said, looking at the camera. "I want justice, for me, and for every domestic worker who has ever been invisible." The article came out the next day, with a photo of me serving coffee at Rosie's diner. The phone didn't stop ringing. People from all over the county offering support, sharing their stories, asking how to defend themselves. Rose framed the newspaper cover and hung it at the entrance of the diner. "This is just the beginning," she smiled hopefully. For the first time since leaving the mansion, I was able to sleep peacefully, without nightmares. 3 days later, a black, elegant car stopped in front of the diner. Rick Caldwell, Mrs. Eleanor, and Mr. Walter's eldest son got out of the car with that imposing manner of his. The entire diner went silent when he walked in. "Megan," he said, his voice controlled, "we need to talk alone." Rose gave me a worried look, but I gestured to reassure her that I was okay. I led Rick to the small storage room that served as an office behind the diner. "My family is willing to make a deal," he said bluntly. "You drop the lawsuit and we'll pay you a generous compensation, enough to buy a little house and live comfortably." "What about the other employees?" I asked. "They are not part of this negotiation," he replied dryly. "This is just between you and us." I felt a pang in my chest. There he was, the boy I had so often comforted after a scolding from his father, whom I taught how to make cookies and told stories of my hometown. "Think about it, Megan," he continued. "If this goes all the way to court, it could take years. Do you want to spend the rest of your life in court?" The offer was tempting. With that money, I would have the security I had always fought for. "But abandon the others. I'll give you my answer tomorrow," I replied. That late afternoon, during our meeting in the church hall, I told the group about the proposal. The reactions were immediate. "Take it, Megan," said Teresa. "At least someone will get justice." "Don't trust it," warned Joe. "This looks like a trap." Soon the group was divided. Some looked at me with hope, others with suspicion. The unity we had built began to unravel. Ernie arrived late, clearly upset. "The Caldwells have retaliated. They've filed suit against our whole group. Now they accuse everyone here of defamation and conspiracy." Panic took over. Many began to distance themselves, afraid of losing their jobs or being exposed in the newspapers. In less than an hour, only the most resistant remained. "What are we going to do?" asked Karen, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was Timmy sobbing. "Mary, my grandpa found out I was the one who gave you the papers. They're sending me to a boarding school in Connecticut. I leave tomorrow. I was consumed by guilt. Because of me, that kid was being taken away from his home. How many more would suffer because of my decisions? When I got back to Sweetwater Diner, counter, I found Lucy with a heavy look on her face. Inspectors from the health department came, she explained. They found some irregularities. We have 72 hours to fix them or they'll shut us down. The strategy was clear. Isolate, pressure, break. And it was working. Every day the pressure increased. There were 3 more inspections at the diner that week alone. Joe lost his job as a driver for another wealthy family. Karen started receiving veiled threats about her kids' safety. Everyone was starting to succumb to the power of the Harrisons. One rainy afternoon, while we were cleaning, up after yet another inspection, we heard loud knocks on the back door. When I opened it, I saw Michelle Fields, a reporter from the national newspaper, The Chronicle. "Sorry for the late hour," she said, taking off her wet coat. But this couldn't wait. Michelle placed a file on the table. Inside, there were documents showing a pattern of labor abuses in all of the Harrisons' businesses, textile mills, hotels, restaurants. Hundreds of workers in conditions as bad as or worse than ours. Your case has already caught the country's attention, Michelle explained. Other journalists have started investigating. It's not just about a housekeeper in upstate New York. It's a systemic problem. I felt the floor disappearing beneath my feet. "How did you get all this?" "We have sources inside the companies. And this," she said, pointing to a page, "came straight from the Harrisons' house." The handwritten note on the side of the document was in a familiar script. It was from Emily, Rodrigo's youngest daughter, who had always been good friends with Timmy. That night, I received a call from the State Human Rights Commission. Our struggle had caught their attention, and they began to support us with legal resources. For the first time, we weren't just a group of employees against a powerful family. We were part of a larger cause. Father Michael offered a larger space for the meetings when the group started growing again. Not only former employees of the Harrisons, but also those from other wealthy families began to appear, each with their own evidence and their own stories. Ernie arrived one afternoon with news. Lawyers from New York City, specialists in labor. Law had offered free assistance to everyone. "We're forming a national front," he said enthusiastically. "Your case could set a precedent across the whole country." The Harrisons' response was swift. Rodrigo showed up at Sweetwater Diner again, this time with an even bigger offer, just for me. "Think about your age, your health," he insisted. "Is it worth sacrificing what's left of your peace of mind for a fight you might not even see the end of?" I looked firmly at him, recognizing the same cold calculation in his eyes as in his mother's. "Rodrigo, I cleaned your scrapes, taught you how to ride a bike, comforted you when you cried as a little boy. I never imagined you'd turn into this." His expression hardened. 48 hours, Mary. After that, there's no more offer." When he left, Lucy took my hands in hers. "Whatever you decide, I'll be by your side." That night, looking at the distant lights of Saratoga Springs through the window, a strange peace washed over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. And for the first time, my destiny was up to me. Rodrigo's offer expired, and I gave no response. My silence was my declaration of war, and the Harrisons understood the message. The legal battle heated up, with teams of lawyers clashing in courtrooms. While our story gained national attention, TV shows started contacting me for interviews. At first, I refused. I was terrified of showing my face to the public. "I'm not a good speaker," I confessed to Lucy. "You're better than you think," she replied. "Your story is powerful because it's true." With the support of the group, I finally agreed to give an interview on American Voices, an important news program. I trembled before the cameras, but I told my life story. The early mornings preparing coffee, the late nights caring for sick children, the missed birthdays, the Christmases working while everyone else celebrated. "What are you hoping for from this action?" asked the host. "Dignity," I replied without hesitating. "For myself and for all those who have lived their lives without being seen." The interview went viral. Messages of support flooded in from across the country. Former housekeepers, many of them elderly, sent letters sharing similar experiences. Some traveled for hours just to shake my hand or receive a hug. The small storage room at the Lemon Bliss Cleaning Company turned into an impromptu command center. Volunteers, many of them law students from UCLA, helped us organize testimonies and documents. Karen showed a natural talent for coordinating everything, while Joe used his contacts from his days as a truck driver to arrange transportation for witnesses coming from remote counties. The Vanderbilts responded with the full weight of their influence. Allied newspapers published articles questioning my character, suggesting my motivation was purely money. Acquaintances from the past were persuaded to speak ill of me. They even tried to spread rumors about a supposed affair between me and Ernie to discredit our cause. Teresa suffered an accident that left her with a broken arm. The The intimidation only increased, but surprisingly, our group remained firm and even gained followers. Soon the issue crossed American borders. International human rights organizations sent representatives to monitor the legal action. A renowned American actress who had grown up in a house with domestic workers publicly declared her support. Mrs. Vanderbilt, cornered by media pressure, gave an interview trying to justify herself, but her condescending tone only made things worse. "We always treated her like family," she declared with that forced smile I knew so well. "Nobody treats family the way they treated me," I responded in another report. "Family isn't deprived of education, social security, or a dignified retirement." On a cold morning in January, I received a call that would change the course of our fight again. It was Tim, calling from Pittsburgh. "Grandma's sick, Miss Mary. Real sick, and she's asking for you." The news floored me. Was it another tactic to weaken us or a genuine plea for help? Either way, I knew it was time to face my past head on. The decision to visit Mrs. Vanderbilt divided opinions within the group. "It could be a trap," warned Joe. "Don't go alone," insisted Karen. But something inside me said I needed to close that chapter. I returned to the Vanderbilt mansion exactly 5 months after my departure. The lawn was unkempt. The ivy I planted had overtaken the walls. The grand wooden door, which I had opened so many times to receive guests, opened to receive me. Tim was waiting for me in the hall. Military school was already leaving its mark. He was thinner, with deep circles under his eyes, but his eyes held a new determination. He hugged me in silence and led me to the master bedroom. Mrs. Vanderbilt was lying down, her skin yellow, her body visibly weakened. "Terminal pancreatic cancer," Tim explained over the phone. "The best doctors were adamant. A matter of weeks, maybe days." "Mary," she whispered in an almost inaudible voice, that voice that had commanded the house and everyone around it. "I didn't think you'd come." I sat beside the bed, looking at this woman who had controlled my life for 4 decades. Now she seemed so small, so fragile. "Why did you fire me like that?" I asked bluntly. It was one of the questions that had robbed me of sleep and deserved an answer. "Fear," she murmured after a long silence. "Richard lost a fortune in bad bets, risky investments. We thought we'd have to sell the house, that we'd end up firing everyone. We started with you because you knew how much you owed me in benefits," I finished. She nodded, dejected. "And you knew the most about our secrets, our shames, the way we treated everyone." A violent cough interrupted her words. "We were ungrateful. You were more loyal than any friend." Mr. Vanderbilt quietly entered the room, aged, his face marked by months of bitterness. Our eyes met for the first time since the beginning of the dispute. "Let's end this," he announced, his voice hoarse. "I told the lawyers to withdraw all the lawsuits and prepared reparations not only for you, Mary, but for everyone who was harmed. We'll create a fund to ensure a dignified retirement for former employees." "Why now?" I asked. "Because Eugenie asked me to," he answered simply. "And because Tim threatened to leave the family if we didn't do the right thing." I looked at the boy, who watched everything from the door with tears in his eyes. There I understood that my true legacy was not service, but what I had unknowingly planted, seeds of justice and dignity in that boy. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Eleanor passed away. I attended the funeral not as the help, but as a witness to an era coming to an end. The settlement was finalized the following day. Fair compensation, public acknowledgement of past wrongs, and a written commitment to improved working conditions across all of the Sterling enterprises. With my share, I bought a small plot of land near downtown Asheville, and with the help of those who fought alongside me, we founded the Workers' Haven, a community center where domestic workers receive legal aid, job training, and above all, are treated with the dignity they deserve. In the afternoons, I still make my signature spiced lattes at Sweet Serenity, now as Lucy's partner. Young people stop by to hear my stories, learning that justice, even when delayed, is possible when you stand up for what's right. My name is Mary Johnson. I worked 40 years for a family worth millions, but I finally discovered my true calling, to be living proof that change happens, especially when we have the courage to demand what we deserve.